On the 14th of June, 1969, a 6-year-old boy named Dennis Martin was hiking with his family in the Great Smoky Mountains. It was Father's Day weekend, a tradition his family had kept for generations. They had reached a grassy highland meadow called Spence Field, high on the ridge, and the boys in the group decided to play a small prank, splitting up to sneak through the trees and surprise the adults. Dennis went one way. The other boys went another. A few minutes later, they jumped out laughing. But Dennis was not with them. In the 3 to 5 minutes it had taken, he had simply vanished into the forest. That night, a thunderstorm rolled in and dropped 3 inches of rain, washing away his tracks and any scent he had left behind. What followed became the largest search in the history of the park. Around 1,400 people, park rangers, Boy Scouts, rescue squads, even Green Berets and military helicopters, combed 56 square miles of mountains. They found nothing. No clothing. No remains. No trace. More than 50 years later, Dennis Martin is still missing, one of several people who walked into these mountains and were never seen again. He did not fall from a cliff or meet a predator anyone ever saw. The forest simply closed around a child, in a place his family knew well, surrounded by people. This national park is loved by millions of visitors every year. But what most people don't know is the dark truth hidden beneath its beauty. Stay until the end to discover the shocking reality. The Great Smoky Mountains National Park straddles the border between Tennessee and North Carolina, along the spine of the southern Appalachians. It covers more than 520,000 acres of ancient, forested mountains. It was chartered in the 1930s, and today it is the most visited national park in the entire country. More than 12 million people come here every year, often more than twice the number that visit the Grand Canyon. And that single fact is the root of everything dangerous about this place. Because most of those 12 million people do not believe they are entering a wilderness at all. There are no towering desert cliffs here, no glaciers, no obvious hazards. There are soft green ridges, wildflowers, black bears by the roadside, and a scenic loop you can drive in an afternoon. It looks gentle. It looks tame. It looks like a garden. And that is exactly the illusion that gets people killed. Because underneath the soft green surface, this is a vast, dense, ancient wilderness, and it hides its dangers better than almost any park in America. The mountains here are among the oldest on Earth, worn down over hundreds of millions of years into steep, tangled, endlessly folded terrain, cloaked in one of the densest forests on the continent. That forest is so thick that a person 100 feet off the trail can become completely invisible. There are no long sight lines, no distant landmarks to steer by. Just trees, and undergrowth, and ridge after ridge that all look the same. The park earned its name from the blue-gray haze that rises off the forest and hangs in the valleys, a soft, beautiful fog. And that same fog is one of the most disorienting forces in these mountains. It can descend in minutes, erasing the trail, the sky, and any sense of direction, until a hiker who was perfectly found becomes perfectly lost, a few steps from where they were standing. It helps to understand just how much wilderness is hidden behind the scenic overlooks. The park holds more than 800 miles of trails, and the Appalachian Trail itself runs for over 70 miles along its high crest. Beyond the handful of famous, crowded spots lies an enormous backcountry of remote ridges, deep coves, and river valleys where a visitor may not see another person for a very long time. This is one of the wildest and most biologically rich landscapes in the eastern half of the country, home to thousands of species, from one of the densest black bear populations in the region to elk, wild boar, and more kinds of salamander than almost anywhere on Earth. It is a true, functioning wilderness ecosystem. And a functioning wilderness does not stop being wild simply because a road runs through a corner of it, or because millions of people photograph its edges every year. This is why the Smokies have a long, quiet history of disappearances. The story of Dennis Martin is the most famous, but it is not alone. Several missing persons cases in this park remain unsolved to this day. People who set out on a trail or wandered a short distance from a group and were simply never found. Getting lost here is not like getting lost in an open landscape, where you can climb to a high point and see where you need to go. In the Smokies, the forest is a green wall in every direction. The terrain is a maze of identical-looking ridges and drainages. And the moment a person leaves the trail, whether to find a better view, or a shortcut, or a lost child, the wilderness becomes vast in a way that the scenic loop road never suggested. People walk in circles. They descend into drainages that grow steeper and more tangled with every step. They move at night, or in fog, and lose the little ground they had. And the same density that hides a lost person from view also hides them from the searchers trying desperately to find them. The story of the search for Dennis Martin reveals why these mountains are so merciless to the lost. So many people rushed in to help, well over 1,000, that the searchers themselves became part of the problem, trampling the very ground and the very clues that might have led to him. Park officials later concluded that overwhelming a search with untrained volunteers can do more harm than good. And there is a deeper, sadder truth in the way lost people, especially children, behave in terrain like this. A frightened child does not stay in the open where they can be seen. They crawl into thickets, under rock ledges, into exactly the kind of cover that a forest this dense offers everywhere. They move, often downhill, often at night, drifting further from the place where searchers are looking. In a landscape with no sight lines and endless hiding places, a person can be within yards of a search line and never be seen, never be heard, and never be found. Search and rescue professionals will tell you that once you realize you are lost, the single best thing you can do is stop. Stay where you are, make yourself visible, and let the searchers come to you, because they work outward from the place you were last known to be. But the human mind, frightened and alone in a darkening forest, fights that advice with everything it has. Movement feels like progress. Staying still feels like surrender. And so the lost keep walking, deeper into the drainages, further from the trail, harder to find with every hour, driven by an urgency that in these mountains is very often fatal. The forest that hid them from view now hides them from rescue, and the harder they struggle against it, the more completely it closes around them. Water is the next danger, and in this park it is the one that kills most often. The Smokies are laced with rivers, streams, and waterfalls, fed by some of the heaviest rainfall in the eastern United States. At the higher elevations, some parts of the park receive more than 80 inches of rain a year, which makes this, in effect, a temperate rainforest. All of that water runs downhill, over smooth rock worn slick by centuries of flow. The rivers look inviting on a hot summer day, clear and cool and shallow seeming. They are also cold, fast, and far more powerful than they appear. Drowning is one of the leading causes of death in this park, and it usually follows the same pattern. Someone steps onto a wet rock at the top of a waterfall for a photograph, and the rock is slick as ice. Someone wades into a pool below a cascade and is caught by a current stronger than they expected. Someone slips into cold water and finds, within moments, that the cold has stolen the strength from their arms and legs. The beautiful waterfalls that draw people off the trail are, again and again, the places where people die. The waterfalls deserve special caution because they combine every water hazard at once. The rock at the lip and along the sides is coated in algae and constant spray, and it is slick in a way that gives no warning underfoot. The pools below are deeper and colder than they look, with currents and undertows churning beneath a deceptively calm surface. And sudden immersion in cold mountain water triggers a physical shock, an involuntary gasp, a racing heart, a loss of breath control that can incapacitate even a strong, calm swimmer in the first moments. A person who slips at the top of a fall may be swept over it. A person who wades in below may be pulled under and held. The park posts warnings at these places for a reason, and every year, someone steps past them for a better photograph and does not come back. Then there are the bears. The Great Smoky Mountains hold one of the densest populations of black bears anywhere in the East, roughly 1,900 of them, about 2 for every square mile. Black bears are usually shy, and fatal attacks are genuinely rare. But rare is not never, and the park's history contains a warning that should stay with anyone who walks these trails. On the 21st of May 2000, a 50-year-old schoolteacher named Glenda Bradley was hiking on the Little River Trail. She was an experienced hiker in an area she knew well, waiting on the trail while her companion fished nearby. When he returned, he found her backpack on the ground and 2 black bears, a female and her yearling cub, near her body. It was a predatory attack, the first bear-caused death in the park's history. 20 years later, in 2020, a man named Patrick Madura, camping alone in the backcountry, became the second. These deaths are rare against a backdrop of millions of safe visits. But they carry the same lesson every time. These are wild predators, not roadside attractions. And the people most at risk are often the confident ones, hiking alone, comfortable in familiar country, certain that an attack is the kind of thing that only happens to someone else. The park works constantly to keep its bears wild, and much of that work comes down to food. A bear that learns to associate people with an easy meal, from an unsecured cooler, a dropped sandwich, a poorly hung food bag, loses its fear, and a bear that has lost its fear of humans is a dangerous animal. This is why the park is so strict about food storage, requiring bear cables and locked containers, and why rangers repeat a hard truth. A fed bear too often becomes a dead bear, once it has to be put down for the safety of visitors. And the encounters are not always predatory or provoked. In 2021, a teenage girl was attacked by a bear as she slept in a hammock and had to be flown to a hospital. Bears here climb into campsites, tear into packs, and follow the scent of food to exactly where people sleep. The rules about food are not about tidiness. They are about keeping a wild predator wild and keeping the people around it alive. The weather and the elevation add another layer that catches visitors completely off guard. People arrive in the warm, humid lowlands and assume the whole park will feel the same. But the Smokies rise to more than 6,600 feet at their highest point, and the mountaintops are a different world. It can be 10, 15, 20 degrees colder up on the ridges than in the valley, and far wetter, and far windier. A hiker who starts in a t-shirt on a warm morning can climb into cold rain and heavy fog by afternoon, soaked through, with the temperature falling. Hypothermia does not require winter. In a wet, wind-exposed mountain forest, it can set in at temperatures that feel merely chilly, especially in someone tired, underdressed, and far from shelter. The very rainfall that makes these mountains so green and so beautiful is the same rainfall that soaks a lost or stranded hiker to the bone and begins, quietly, to pull the heat out of their body. And the high, open meadows called balds, the very places prized for their sweeping views, carry their own danger in a storm. Exposed on an open ridgeline, a hiker caught in one of the park's sudden, violent thunderstorms becomes one of the tallest things around, in a region that sees a great deal of lightning. Those storms build fast, out of clear summer mornings, exactly as the one did on the night Dennis Martin disappeared, arriving with a wall of rain that can soak, chill, and disorient a hiker in minutes, and wash away every trace that someone passed. And there is fire, which most people would never associate with a place this wet and green. But in the autumn of 2016, after months of severe drought, a fire began high on the Chimney Tops Trail, in steep terrain that made it difficult to reach. For several days it smoldered, seeming contained. Then, on the 28th of November, an extreme wind event swept through, with gusts reaching nearly 90 miles an hour. Those winds took the fire and hurled it out of the park and down into the town of Gatlinburg, throwing burning embers for miles and igniting new fires as they went. In a matter of hours, the fire exploded across 17,000 acres. 14 people were killed. Around 190 were injured. Thousands of buildings were damaged or destroyed. It became the deadliest wildfire in the history of the eastern United States. And it started as a small fire in a green mountain forest that nobody believed could burn like that. None of this is hypothetical, and the pattern of emergencies makes that plain. Behind the postcard image, this park generates a steady stream of incidents, hundreds of search and rescue responses, and countless injuries every year, drawn from that vast pool of 12 million mostly unprepared visitors. Sprained and broken ankles on deceptively rugged trails. Heat exhaustion and dehydration on longer hikes than people planned for. Hikers caught out after dark with no light, no layers, and no way to call for help. Lost children. Overdue hikers. Swimmers pulled from the rivers. Most of these emergencies share a single root cause, and it is not bad luck. It is that people brought the caution of a city park to a genuine mountain wilderness, and the gap between the two is exactly where the danger lives. When something goes wrong in the Smokies, help can be far harder to reach than the crowds and the roads suggest. Across most of the park's interior, there is little or no cell coverage. The same dense forest and folded terrain that hide a lost hiker also slow the search and rescue teams sent to find them, and make aerial searching nearly useless beneath the canopy. The park is enormous, and much of it is genuine backcountry, a long way from any trailhead. A person injured or lost deep in these mountains may be hours from rescue even after someone realizes they are missing, and in cold, wet conditions, hours are exactly what a stranded person does not have. The rangers and volunteers who go in after them do so in the same fog, the same cold, and the same tangled terrain that swallowed the person they are trying to save. But the deepest danger in the Smokies is not the fog, or the water, or the bears, or the fire. It is the assumption that this park is safe because it is popular. 12 million visitors a year, paved overlooks, a scenic loop, gift shops, and crowds create a powerful feeling that this is a managed, gentle, forgiving place. And so people relax completely. They step off the trail without a thought. They let children run ahead into the trees. They climb onto the wet rock above the waterfall. They set off on a longer hike than they planned, in cotton clothes, with no map, no light, and a single bottle of water, because it is just a walk in the woods in the most visited park in the country. The crowds themselves become a kind of false reassurance. If this many people are here, it must be safe. But the crowds are concentrated in a few small areas, and the wilderness begins just past the edge of the parking lot. A few steps into that forest, the 12 million other visitors might as well not exist. That is the true nature of the Great Smoky Mountains. Not menace, not malice. Indifference, wrapped in one of the most beautiful and welcoming landscapes in America. These mountains are older than the Rockies, older than the Alps, older almost than bone and tree, worn down over an expanse of time the mind cannot hold. The forest was closing over the lost and the unlucky long before there was a park, or a road, or a single visitor to admire it. The rivers ran cold and fast, the fog rose and fell. The bears lived by their own ancient rules, for hundreds of millions of years before we arrived. The mountains do not know how many people visit. They do not know that it looks gentle from the road. They do not soften the current, or lift the fog, or hold back the forest, for anyone. They simply are what they are. Ancient, vast, green, and completely indifferent. And that is not a reason to stay away. It is a reason to be honest about where you are. The millions who come to the Smokies and go home safely are not the ones who conquered these mountains. They are the ones who respected them. They stayed on the trail and off the wet rock at the top of the falls. They kept their children close and their distance from the bears, and a warm layer in the pack even on a sunny morning. They understood that the softness of this landscape is real, and so is its scale, and that the two are not in conflict. They grasped the one thing that so many of the lost did not, in the moment it mattered most. That a forest gentle enough to feel like a garden can still be deep enough to lose a person forever. So the question is not whether the Great Smoky Mountains are worth visiting. They are among the most beautiful places in the country. The question is whether you understand where you are when you step into them. Not the version with the scenic loop and the crowds and the roadside bears. The real one. An ancient, fog-shrouded wilderness where a child can vanish in 3 minutes within sight of his family, where the gentle rivers drown the strongest swimmers, and where the green forest, so soft and so welcoming, can close around a person and never give them back. The mountains will not warn you when the trail has slipped away behind you. They will not tell you the fog is coming. They only wait, with the patience of something far older than us, to see whether you understood, before you stepped off the path, exactly how vast the woods around you truly were.